Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing. Today we are going to be once again continuing to read The Golden Age by Kenneth Grahame. So, let's get going. I know a jolly story, he began. Aunt Eliza told it me. It was when she was somewhere over in that beastly abroad. He had once spent a black month of misery at Dinan, and there was a fellow there who had got 2 storks, and one stork died. It was the she-stork. What did it die of? Put in Harold. And the other stork was quite sorry, and moped and went on, and got very miserable. So they looked about and found a duck, and introduced it to the stork. The duck was a drake, but the stork didn't mind, and they loved each other and were as jolly as could be. By and by another duck came along, a real she-duck this time, and when the drake saw her he fell in love, and left the stork, and went and proposed to the duck, for she was very beautiful. But the poor stork who was left, he said nothing at all to anybody, but just pined and pined and pined away, till one morning he was found quite dead. But the ducks lived happily ever afterwards. This was Edward's idea of a jolly story. Down again went the corners of poor Charlotte's mouth. Really, Edward's stupid inability to see the real point in anything was too annoying. It was always so. Years before, it being necessary to prepare his youthful mind for a domestic event that might lead to awkward questionings at a time when there was little leisure to invent appropriate answers, it was delicately inquired of him whether he would like to have a little brother or perhaps a little sister. He considered the matter carefully in all its bearings, and finally declared for a Newfoundland pup. Any boy more gleg at the uptack would have met his parents halfway, and eased their burden. As it was, the matter had to be approached all over again from a fresh standpoint. And now, while Charlotte turned away sniffingly, with a hiccup that told of an overwrought soul, Edward, unconscious, like Sir Isaac's diamond, of the mischief he had done, wheeled round on Harold with a shout. "I want a live dragon," he announced. "You've got to be my dragon." "Leave me go, will you?" squealed Harold, struggling stoutly. "I'm playing at something else. How can I be a dragon and belong to all the clubs?" "But wouldn't you like to be a nice scaly dragon, all green?" said Edward, trying persuasion, "with a curly tail and red eyes, and breathing real smoke and fire?" Harold wavered in an instant. Pall Mall was still strong in him. The next he was grovelling on the floor. No saurian ever swung a tail so scaly and so curly as his. Clubland was 1,000 years away. With horrific pants he emitted smokiest smoke and fiercest fire. "Now I want a princess," cried Edward, clutching Charlotte ecstatically, "and you can be the doctor and heal me from the dragon's deadly wound." Of all professions I held the sacred art of healing in worst horror and contempt. Cataclysmal memories of purge and draft crowded thick on me, and with Charlotte, who courted no barren honours, I made a break for the door. Edward did likewise, and the hostile forces clashed together on the mat, and for a brief space things were mixed and chaotic and Arthurian. The silvery sound of the luncheon bell restored an instant peace, even in the teeth of clenched antagonisms like ours. I feel like I've missed a page. The Holy Grail itself, sliding athwart a sunbeam, never so effectually stilled a riot of warring passions into sweet and quiet accord. I really feel like I missed a beat there. What they talked about. Edward was standing ginger beer like a gentleman, happening, as the one that had last passed under the dentist's hands, to be the capitalist of the flying hour. As in all well-regulated families, the usual tariff obtained in ours, 1/2 crown a tooth, 1 shilling only if the molar were a loose one. This one, unfortunately, in spite of Edward's interested affection of agony, had been shaky undisguised. But the event was good enough to run to ginger beer. As financier, however, Edward had claimed exemption from any servile duties of procurement, and had swaggered about the garden while I fetched from the village post office, and Harold stole a tumbler from the pantry. Our preparations complete, we were sprawling on the lawn. The staidest and most self-respecting of the rabbits had been let loose to grace the feast, and was loping demurely about the grass, selecting the juiciest plantains, while Selina, as the eldest lady present, was toying in her affected feminine way with the first full tumbler, daintily fishing for bits of broken cork. "Hurry up, can't you?" growled our host. "What are you girls always so beastly particular for?" "Martha says," explained Harold, thirsty too, but still just, "that if you swallow a bit of cork, it swells and it swells and it swells inside you, till you—" "Oh, bosh," said Edward, draining the glass with a fine pretence of indifference to consequences, but at the same time, as I noticed, dodging the floating cork fragments with skill and judgment. "Oh, it's all very well to say bosh," replied Harold, nettled, "but everyone knows it's true, but you. Why, when Uncle Thomas was here last, and they got up a bottle of wine for him, he took just one tiny sip out of his glass, and then he said, 'Pooh, my goodness, that's corked,' and he wouldn't touch it. And they had to get a fresh bottle up. The funny part was, though, I looked in his glass afterwards when it was brought out into the passage, and there wasn't any cork in it at all, so I drank it all off, and it was very good." "You'd better be careful, young man," said his elder brother, regarding him severely. "Do you remember that night when the mummers were here, and they had mulled port, and you went round and emptied all the glasses after they had gone away?" "Oh, I did feel that funny that night," chuckled Harold. "Thought the house was coming down, it jumped about so. And Martha had to carry me up to bed, 'cause the stairs was going all waggety." We gazed searchingly at our graceless junior, but it was clear that he viewed the matter in the light of a phenomenon rather than a delinquency. A third bottle was by this time circling, and Selina, who had evidently waited for it to reach her, took a most unfairly long pull, and then jumping up and shaking out her frock, announced that she was going for a walk. Then she fled like a hare, for it was the custom of our family to meet with physical coercion any independence of action in individuals. "She's off with those vicarage girls again," said Edward, regarding Selina's long black legs twinkling down the path. "She goes out with them every day now, and as soon as ever they start, all their heads go together and they chatter, 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 the whole blessed time. I can't make out what they find to talk about. They never stop. It's gabble, gabble, gabble right along, like a nest of young rooks." "Perhaps they talk about birds' eggs," I suggested sleepily. The sun was hot, the turf soft, the ginger beer potent. "And about ships and buffaloes and desert islands, and why rabbits have white tails, and whether they'd sooner have a schooner or a cutter. And what they'll be when they're men. At least, I mean, there's lots of things to talk about if you want to talk." "Yes, but they don't talk about those sorts of things at all," persisted Edward. "How can they? They don't know anything. They can't do anything, except play the piano, and nobody would want to talk about that. And they don't care about anything sensible, I mean. So what do they talk about?" "I asked Martha once," put in Harold, "and she said, 'Never you mind. Young ladies has lots of things to talk about that young gentlemen can't understand.'" "I don't believe it," Edward growled. "Well, that's what she said, anyway," rejoined Harold indifferently. The subject did not seem to him of first-class importance, and it was hindering the circulation of the ginger beer. We heard the click of the front gate. Through a gap in the hedge we could see the party setting off down the road. Selina was in the middle, A vicarage girl had her by either arm. Their heads were together, as Edward had described, and the clack of their tongues came down the breeze like the busy pipe of starlings on a bright March morning. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. So I will say, as ever, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.